I bid you welcome, friends, to my humble abode in the middle of, space, to bring you a review about a movie that people love to hate, hate to love, which has inadvertently caused them to hate or love each other for loving and hating it. Right. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be giving my thoughts on a film about dolls for little girls, I'd probably laugh at you. A lot. But since Barbenheimer have spawned a plethora of t-shirts and memes galore, and because my daughter loves Barbie dolls more than normal girls should, I've had a change of heart. I think it's about time that I sit down and discuss my thoughts on a film that clearly wasn't made for someone like me, but apparently wasn't made for anyone else either. Unless you're a middle-aged woman who absolutely despises the opposite gender and most likely lives with a bunch of cats. Oh, speaking of which, here comes one now. Hey, Play-Doh. You need some help with that, buddy? What do you mean, don't bother? You know what? It's fine. In any case, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently this time around. And be aware this video is going to be full of spoilers, so you have been warned. Now sit back, relax, and journey along with me to a little place called Barbie Land. If you've visited my channel in the past, or any other channel that covers the best and worst that entertainment has to offer, then there's a good chance you're wary of films like Barbie. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and she loves to play with Barbie dolls all the time, and so, naturally, she wanted to see this movie with me. Unfortunately, I had seen a few reviews prior to seeing the film myself and felt it best to see it without her first, just in case. Well, it turns out that my instincts were correct. Barbie is not a film for small children. In fact, I'd go as far as to argue that it's not even a film for 11, 12, or 13-year-old girls. It's for much older women who have already moved on from their taste in Barbie dolls as well as their happiness, which is strange. You would think that the first live-action Barbie film, a flagship for an eventual Mattel Cinematic Universe or the MCU, would be a fun-filled adventure full of twists and turns where it teaches its audiences valuable lessons through smartly written, understandable dialogue for both mothers and daughters alike. A film that takes risks with its main character and fulfills the desires of moviegoers by bringing the love of Barbie full circle for all generations, with the occasional politically charged side comments sprinkled on top to appease the crazies, as is the norm these days. But of course, as is also the norm these days, we're not presented with most of the former. We're instead presented with the complete opposite. The opposite of fun, the opposite of adventure, and the opposite of common sense. The only thing you get is great production design and then the politically charged side comment. Except this time that comment is stretched apart in wedgie-like fashion to fit the entirety of this movie's hour and 48-minute runtime. Only droplets of character development and storytelling are here, accompanied by an ending that feels about as earned as a participation trophy being awarded to the guy that shows up to the competition 3 hours late. And then there's Nicki Minaj. Man. Barbie comes off as more of a corporate apology, told through the eyes of a company full of apparent regret as it hammers you over the head with hateful rhetoric towards one specific gender, while veiling itself as a story of heart, friendship, loyalty, and respect. The veil doesn't come off right away though. It takes its time getting you used to the world around you before smacking you right in the face with it. Directed by Greta Gerwig, who also wrote the film with co-writer Noah Baumbach, the movie stars Margot Robbie as a living, breathing, life-sized version of the iconic doll. She and her friends live in Barbie Land, a plastic utopia full of incredibly detailed dollhouses, and all the same, isolated from the oblivious outside world. The Barbies are in charge, of course, and have the best jobs ever, but only share crumb-like aspects of their dream world with the Kens. The Kens themselves are treated as meaningless accessories to the Barbies, who sit outside all day long and beat each other off, just the way Kens were designed to do. And as the film states, they're also homeless. Wonder why? Maybe the Ken houses weren't in the film's budget? Oh well. Barbie's daily routine usually consists of eating and drinking make-believe meals while living alone, going to the beach to ignore Ryan Gosling's Ken, who she shows very visible and unreasonable resentment towards the entire movie, and last but not least, leaving Ken to sulk by himself while she has girls' night. Every night, forever and ever. But life being plastic is not always as fantastic as it seems initially, because when she wakes up one day to find that her feet are flat, her legs have developed cellulite, and her thoughts are consumed by death, well... Barbie seeks advice from Weird Barbie, played by Kate McKinnon, who reveals to Margot Barbie that she is physically and emotionally connected to a Barbie doll in the real world, and that the owner is making her depressed and old, somehow. Basically, the Lego Movie. Again. I know, it blew my mind when I saw it too. So Barbie, out of fear of becoming the living embodiment of the target audience, sets out to the real world to find the girl who owns her and fix it, somehow? Oh, and she's bringing along someone very special and close to her heart.
Closer I am to I'm coming with you.
Before I get into the other issues that haven't already been addressed, I'll just say outright that this movie doesn't make sense. Not on a fundamental level, not on an emotional level, not on any level, really. It's just a Barbie goes here, meets these people, goes back and lets those two people save the day movie. And that's about it. It's full of anti-male rhetoric, most of which involves the main Ken discovering and embracing the literal patriarchy, which then of course turns him into the movie's antagonist. In this film, the men are the villains. They're the villains in Barbie Land, and they're the villains in the real world. And the writing makes absolute certain that this idea is beaten into your brain until you pass out from the pain. The movie hates the people it preaches to, and it preaches to literally everyone, but only once you're seated and invested. The only way you're going to see the filth of this movie coming from a mile away is if you've seen any other mainstream moneymaker in the last 5 years. It's a senseless, chaotic, political spill. A rotten egg, dipped in chocolate to appear appetizing, but beneath the surface, it's vile and disgusting. And what's worse is that the chocolate it's dipped in isn't even its own. The film steals from a bunch of other movies and sews them all together in such an ugly way that even Frankenstein would be offended. You know, Greta Gerwig is supposed to be this big-name director with original ideas, but everything she uses in this movie is taken from another movie. Even the politics. And you only have to look here and there to find them. There's nothing original about this movie. I've seen the plot of this in other films, done much better. If you think about it, in one moment this movie is Disney's Enchanted, but without the charm and wit of Amy Adams' Giselle, and without the love interest that makes it all fit together. Then in another moment, it's the Lego Movie, but without the joy and wonder of playing with the actual toys, and severely lacking any underlying meaning within its context. A fish out of water tale, but the fish is dead and being carried away by a tide of oil and flames, with piranhas lying in wait below to consume the remains. I could go on. The filmmakers of Barbie don't really seem to want to take risks either. Nothing crazy or out of the ordinary happens in this movie other than a film school undergrad's version of a car chase, as well as Barbie and Ken stealing some outfits, being arrested a couple of times but then being let back out on the streets right after. There's a scene of Barbie being chased by Mattel executives in a building too, but I didn't care. All they were going to do was send her back to Barbie Land anyway. No one's in any real danger. There are no stakes. Nothing really happens in this story at all. Instead, whatever story is there simply happens to Barbie and Ken. It seems like the movie is more interested in sending the same message that other films have been pushing for years. The movie vomits the same old tired tropes about how women are victims and men rule the world with an iron fist and revel in subjugation and frat parties. Men are viewed as irreparably dumb in this film, with the women of the movie often correcting, scolding, and verbally crucifying them in ways that would drive any man of sound mind to an immediate vasectomy. It's depressing to see how little effort was put into the storytelling here, but I mean, if you're able to put basic logic aside to appreciate the finer things, you may find a glimpse of positivity in the Barbie movie, and a large chunk of that positivity lies in one place. Earlier I mentioned the set design. Well, as soon as you see it, you will become immediately enamored, because the moment that you step out of Barbie's slippers, you're introduced to some of the coolest production sets and costumes I've seen in a movie this year. This is not an animated film, it's live action. And the crew behind the production of Barbie put a lot of effort into the smallest of details in Barbie Land so that they could bring it and its characters as close to life as possible. I was seriously impressed, which makes it all the more unfortunate that the rest of the movie's set pieces don't quite hold up. The real world, which takes place in Los Angeles, just looks like, well, Los Angeles. It's boring, and the cinematography capturing it all, equally so. The same can be said about Barbie Land itself. At first, it's a feast for the eyes to behold the Barbies and Kens interact in this plastic world, but the feeling is so short-lived. Though the set is amazing for a plastic village, it's also superficial in the ways that it shouldn't be. The movie doesn't really do anything with this place. Everything is of course fake, and the movie leans into that, but it's only at about 5 minutes into the film that everything begins to unravel completely, and you begin to quickly realize just how superficial, political, and boring the entire thing is. And on that note, we now approach the worst part of the film. It's difficult to put into words how much of a mess the characters are. In fact, I think that it's probably the worst part of the movie in general. There are only 3 characters that matter in the grand scope of the plot, and they all matter for the wrong reasons. America Ferrera's Gloria is a prime example of someone who is completely unnecessary but apparently has an important role to play. She's the indirect catalyst that sets the plot into motion, as it's revealed that she's the one who's been playing with and changing the nature of Margot Barbie the whole time. She also gives a monologue at the end of the film that exemplifies everything wrong with movies today. What is the monologue that she spews at the other Barbies as motivation to fight the evil men, you ask? That every single woman is oppressed. I'm not joking. I wish I was, but I'm not. And guess what? It gets much, much worse.
My experience of the moment was that Greta gave me so much space and so much trust, and I obviously didn't want to F it up, and I wanted to do it justice, because I think, you know, when I read those words, it's like, oh, okay, truth, like truth telling, right? And there's no woman in my life that this isn't true for, so like, how do you tell the truth, you know? And that was just the goal, and you gave me so much space and so much trust, and I felt like I could go to all the places because I had so much trust that you would know what was right for the movie. And I felt like, similar to what you said, of like, I'm in Greta Gerwig's hands. Like, I don't know, and I don't know what's happening in your head. Like, only Greta knows what she sees and hears, and that was freedom.
This incoherent rant suggesting that women must meet incredibly unrealistic standards has some merit, because women are indeed held to unrealistic standards in some ways, but if you're going to use men to bring that point home, it's important to recognize that the same is true for men, and that they are also held to incredibly unrealistic standards. The reality is men and women have strengths and weaknesses that complement each other, but also create friction. The key is to find a way to make the two things work so that society can move forward in good faith. But good faith is lost on Greta Gerwig, who only champions one side of the argument while burying the other. Speaking of unrealistic standards, let's talk about Gloria's daughter, who can be classified as a dishonorable mention in this video. She isn't even remotely interesting. Just a sassy, politics-driven, anti-capitalist, anti-cultural appropriation, anti-Barbie, copy-paste teenager that channels the same demonic attitude that other teenage heroin addicts have adopted before her. Looking at you, Cassie Lang.
It's never too late to stop being a
But she's also pro-feminist, which is the most important thing about her character, so it makes perfect sense that she treats her mom like a leper who stole her lunch and ran. You would think that the daughter, being so on the side of women, would be treating her mom with a little bit more respect and care, but that's the power of being a teenager. You can be a pro-feminist and hate your mom. Isn't that great? And then there's Ken, who is probably the funniest and most likable character in the movie, and I believe that was likely unintentional, because when feminist activist extremists write films, they often write men as total chads without even realizing it. Ken is supposed to be the bad guy, but Ryan Gosling's performance just makes you feel sorry for the guy and relate to him against your own will. It just kinda happens. And you know why? Ken just wants Barbie's attention. He simply wants to spend genuine time with her and get to know her as a person, which of course she denies him, even up to the end of the film with zero payoff when she ultimately rejects him forever. Wonder where I've seen nonsense like that before.
There's a possibility.
I don't think so, Quinn.
Quill.
Due to all the rejection and lack of human decency that Ken has endured for who knows how many decades, it's only natural that he then embraces the patriarchy after being given the time of day by a random lady and seeing what the world ruled by men is like. It's a sad situation, but it's fascinating at the same time, because it allows the audience to be entertained for once and connect to a character, with some of the heavier political nonsense finally taking a back seat for a few minutes at a time. Ryan Gosling nails the perfect balance between simp and comic relief, and surprisingly, I found myself rooting for his cause more so than of Barbie and her female compatriots trying to quote-unquote set things right. I sat back in my seat at one point and wondered if it was because I was a man that I was rooting for him, or if it was simply because he was just written better. Even better than Barbie. The most bizarre aspect of Ken's character is that though he is portrayed as the villain, I doubt that anyone watching this movie will truly believe him to be so, and in fact, I wouldn't put it past people to despise Barbie by the end of the film for this exact reason. Now, I'm not saying that Barbie herself didn't have a few funny lines. She did. And other characters did too, but they're so sparse and often overshadowed by the heavy political themes that follow the punchline, or define it. Ryan Gosling's execution is just better. Ken as a character is a rare example of accidental success in the court of public opinion. He's lovable, charming, silly to a fault, but in all the right ways. I'll admit, they even give Ken a considerable amount of power near the end of the movie, because at one point he uses his patriarchy to easily dominate and take control of Barbie Land and its inhabitants, quickly and easily. The Barbies obviously do not resist this, and even fall in love with the men's newfound confidence in themselves and Zack Snyder's Justice League. Fun fact, there is some merit to this idea, but most of it is a lie because it paints women in a negative light, as weak and easily manipulated in general, who constantly victimize themselves, and we all know that isn't true. Just like it isn't true that men are always beer-drinking, Justice League-watching chads who subjugate women. There's this misconception on display that makes all these people look like they're competing for control of their world, when in reality, they should be working together. These stereotypes that Gerwig has created for this film are incredibly toxic, and will no doubt cause more division than there already is in this world. I would rather live in a world where Barbies and Kens work together and fix their problems together. And so, by all accounts, I'm just going to pretend that this is the ending of the movie and end the video here. Except it's not the ending, because Hollywood sucks and so does Greta Gerwig, which brings us to the worst character in the movie, Barbie herself. Margot Barbie is the epitome of cruelty. In the trailers of the movie before its release, Barbie is shown as a compassionate, bubbly, and often ditzy character who smiles and waves at her friends, and at Ken, says cheerful things, looks cheerful, and lifts up other Barbies. The marketing team did an incredible job showing Barbie and Ken as besties who travel the world together, but if you look past the smiles, and the waves, and the ahas, and the hi Kens, or if you simply watch the movie, then you're in for a wild epiphany. Barbie is not a happy or exciting or sweet character. She's selfish, cruel, and alienating. Ken gets to see Barbie for who she really is, more than anyone, as he is the one who pursues her the most. She constantly treats him like a nuisance, accusing him of slowing her down, has no issues leaving him all alone by himself after he begs for acknowledgement and friendship, and again, ultimately, she rejects his romantic notions in the end, and only consoles him for like 5 seconds after his defeat, when he has a full-on psychotic break right in front of her and cries in the fetal position. And you know what? She totally abandons him by the end of the film anyway. right before leaving Barbie Land behind forever, and all her friends with it, so that she can live her life as a human? With the help of the creator of Barbie herself, by the way, because that totally matters. By the way, is this old lady alive in the movie? Is she dead? Or in some kind of abyss or a void, and it's just like, what? Is she a ghost? Does it matter? I don't even care. To be fair, though, Barbie did at least give Ken the agency to be his own man and not rely on her to be happy in the end, which is to her credit as a character, though it doesn't make up for the rest of her incompetence, which is about 1.5 hours long. Most of all, I think the worst of Barbie's actions, and the worst part of the entire film, is the ending. In the conflict, Barbie and her two real-world friends and a couple other Barbies go on a brainwashing spree to break up all the Barbies and Kens because otherwise they'll be oppressed or something, and Barbie will be sad and continue to cry like a baby. Then when she saves everyone, she just up and leaves them all behind. First off, that's just awful. Why doesn't Barbie take her friends with her into the real world? Why does she leave them there? And once she does leave, what's to stop Ken and the others from taking Barbie Land back over? It's not like once they all adopted the patriarchal lifestyle that they would just magically forget it once Barbie ruined their plans. Ken's siege of Barbie Land only took 10 minutes? All he needs to do is try a little bit harder the second time around and Bob's your uncle. Well, she's gone. So anyway, who wants to drink fake beer together? And on top of that, normal people and Barbies can still drive in and out of Barbie Land. The executives, led by a visibly tired Will Ferrell, drove right in with their black SUVs. I recall that Weird Barbie says something about the pink convertible being the way in and out, but clearly not. So if you really think about it, Barbie and her friends, for all intents and purposes, solved nothing. Nothing at all. No issues were resolved, no loose ends were tied, and no character moments were achieved. But hey, at least the old Barbie lady congratulated Barbie for helping a mom and daughter connect. Man, this movie is an all new kind of stupid. The other Barbies and Kens are simply extensions of original Barbie and Ken themselves. Each one is designed to look unique and different, but there's nothing past the surface. Nothing more than the one-liners they're given to say. Down with the patriarchy! That word is used more than 10 times in the movie, by the way. I can be anything I want. Democracy, plutocracy, constitution. I have value. Me, I. Gloria and her daughter, who I can't remember the name of, are exactly the same, too. They follow the formula of the mother-daughter journey, but the meat and potatoes have been stripped from the bones of their struggles, and so they haphazardly solve the drift between them with no real conflict in mind, and you end up not even caring. Just like I don't care right now, because I've had enough. Which finally brings us to... all in all, this movie sucks. I'm not even sure how it made money, but it did, and I think that for Mattel as a company, it's great news. For us, not so much. When the movie gives up and transforms into a musical at the very last second with one of the most absurd dance sequences I've seen in my life, then you know you've lost the plot, so to speak, and the proof is right in front of you. The Barbie movie is a near joyless, soulless cash grab that uses extreme social issues to appeal to the female demographic. A flaming trash heap full of unnecessary sexual jokes about vaginas, penises, and group-wide homosexual masturbation. And above all, it hates its characters, especially the important ones. But beneath that, once you sit and really start to watch this movie, you will realize afterward that the movie only told you that being a mother is worthless, that being a wife is dumb, that having a family, raising a child, being pregnant is a waste of your time and energy, and on top of that, being a man is, of course, the worst thing on earth. Because of course it is. And it's so much better to live by yourself and have no friends and no certain future. And this very method of storytelling betrays the audience, and it betrays the main character because it forces us to watch as Barbie is propelled into a life of self-serving careerhood with no one to support her as she subjects herself to a world that she is against, plays by its rules and sacrifices what makes being Barbie or human so wonderful in the first place. At the beginning of this movie, Barbie is alone. Did you notice that she lives alone, eats alone, When she travels to save herself from succumbing to age, she tries to do it alone. When Barbie Land is saved, she leaves Ken alone and her friends alone. And by the end of the movie, as she enters a hospital wearing a fancy suit, obviously having found somewhat success and smiling at the receptionist because she can be anything she wants, she's alone. Completely and totally alone. And that is the Barbie movie. I'm not usually the type of person to give movies a score of any kind, but I think for this movie, I'll make an exception. I'm gonna give Barbie a 4 out of 10. Have a nice day, everybody.